In 2006, AMD was trouncing Intel in just about everything. The Pentium 4 was a disaster. It ran really hot, sucked a lot of power, and was just completely falling behind. But then Intel released a processor that changed everything overnight. The Intel Core 2 Duo. So 20 years on, let's build one together and compare the difference. So I've got a Core 2 Duo and a Pentium 4, same socket. We can put it into the same motherboard with the same specs and test the difference and see what a big leap the Core 2 Duo was. This was the CPU that saved Intel. So today we're celebrating the 20th anniversary of one of Intel's most important processors, the Core 2 Duo. But to understand why this CPU became legendary, first we have to go back in time when Intel was in a bit of trouble. So in the early 2000s, CPU performance was measured almost entirely by clock speed. We knew 2 GHz is always going to be faster than 1.5 GHz. This was the simple measure a consumer went by. So Intel figured the more, the merrier. So with this in mind, Intel designed the Pentium 4 around an architecture called NetBurst that would allow them to raise the clock speeds up nice and high. The price they paid in order to achieve this is that they had to have a very long instruction pipeline, up to 31 stages to complete an instruction. At the same time, AMD's Athlon 64 was beating the Pentium 4 in many games while consuming much less power at lower clock frequencies. Intel realized they couldn't keep chasing clock speeds forever. They completely changed their philosophy and focused on how much work each clock cycle did rather than how fast we can make each clock cycle. So on one side, I've got Intel's Pentium 4 650, a high-end single-core processor with hyper-threading running at 3.4 GHz. On the other side is the Core 2 Duo E6320, which is the same as the E6300, only a little more cache, which was the absolute entry-level Core 2 Duo processor when they were launched, running at just 1.86 GHz. All right, look at this for our test bench. So, got our 2 CPUs here. This is the motherboard we're going to be using. This is a Gigabyte GA965P. Great motherboard. 4 gigs of DDR2 from Corsair. These are brilliant. And to top it all off, look at this for the video card. GeForce 7950 GT. Brilliant. So this is all, again, from the year 2006. That's the theme we're going with. Going to try and keep it period correct. Okay, so everything's plugged in. Let's see if we can get this thing to boot. I haven't used this motherboard in years. This was a donation. So I've got the Pentium 4 in there for now. Make sure that works. Install all of our operating system onto the hard drives and then compare the difference. Let's see, I'll just turn the power supply on. Oh, all good. Here we go. Look at that. Wonderful, fantastic. This video can now continue. So keeping in with our 2006 theme, we've got to go with Windows XP. I contemplated Windows Vista, but I wanted to spare you guys, and also Windows Vista came out early 2007. So Windows XP it is. So let's kick things off with 3D Mark 06. Running through this benchmark, they are pretty much neck and neck. Looking at Return to ProxyCon, exactly the same. Then we move on to Firefly Forest, Canyon Flight, and it's all the same frame rates. The only difference was the processor score. So our results came in at 4593 for the Pentium 4 and 5195 for the Core 2. How good is that? That is a 13% increase at almost half the clock speed. Just shows you the efficiency of that Core 2 chip. Next we move on to Cinebench 9.5. Now this one is really interesting because it's more focused on the CPU performance. Now the Pentium does have hyperthreading, so it can do the multi-core test also, but you can see the real power of having 2 true real cores here. Even in single core performance, the Core 2 Duo definitely beats the Pentium 4, but in dual core, look at that, really scales well. But you know, enough of the synthetic benchmark, let's go into some real world tests, and we're going to start it off with Painkiller, released in 2004. And you know what? You can see a real difference here, but sometimes it goes more than double the frame rate on the Core 2 Duo. This is absolutely outstanding. Did not expect this. This one really surprised me. I couldn't believe what a massive difference this was. I know I'm going to keep reiterating this, but this is almost half the clock speed. I mean, this is the lowest end Core 2 Duo you could buy, and look at it perform. And I look at this section when there's lots of mobs on the screen. This is where you really need more performance, and the Core 2 Duo definitely delivers. Next up, we have Need for Speed Carbon, released in late 2006, just a few months after the Core 2 Duo, incidentally, so it's a perfect game to test these chips. Now, looking at the side-by-side performance, there actually isn't much of a difference on this one. It's very close. This was a fantastic game. It really bumped the graphics up quite a bit. Especially when you're going fast, that sense of speed with that motion blur, really cool. This is a fantastic game, but looking at these performances, they are very similar. Not much difference in it. But we've still got to give it to the Core 2 Duo because it's running so efficiently at that lower clock speed. Next up is Crysis. If you were building a gaming PC back in 2007 when this game was released, this was the game everyone wanted to run. The game that brought just about every PC to its knees. Ever since that, it's been used as a benchmark for the era. We'll start off with the entry sequence where we do our beach landing, and we can see the frame rates here are pretty close. There's not too much in it here. There's times where the Core 2 Duo does, leap a little bit more and jumps up in frame rate, but it does change once we get to that iconic sunrise. Look at this. So we can see a little bit more bump up in frame rates here. In this section, I've noticed that frame rates can jump up to about 20, maybe 30% more in some areas, but yeah, there's definitely an advantage to the Core 2 Duo for sure in this game. Our last test is Test Drive Unlimited, released in 2006. At the time, this was awesome. It was completely different from all the other racing games. Instead of racing on a closed circuit, you had the entire island of Oahu to explore. That was friggin' awesome. 1,600 kilometers of roads, changing scenery, and online multiplayer. This was a pretty ambitious game for its time. This game starts off with you landing at the airport and grabbing a rental car. So the first place you drive out of is the airport, which we can see to the left. For some reason, the color is different on each of these processors. I have no idea why this occurred, but you can sort of see there's slight color differences between the Core 2 Duo and the Pentium 4. Nonetheless, looking at the frame rates, you can see the Core 2 Duo definitely is leading here. But this is such a fun, fantastic free roam game. Just great to just drive around and explore. And with the Core 2 Duo, you can really see that frame rate increase. Fantastic. It really shows that Intel really struck the target they were going for with the Core 2 Duo. At these lower clock speeds, look at the performance we're getting here. This is absolutely outstanding. A cooler core running at lower power, better efficiency, and just getting much better performance. This was that absolute game changer for Intel and really helped them recover from that whole Pentium 4 disaster. Don't get me wrong, the Pentium 4 is no slouch either, but it's pushing really hard and really hot to try and reach those numbers. It really was at the end of its tether. Looking back at the Core 2 Duo, you can see why it was such a legendary processor. Intel didn't just make a faster Pentium 4, they completely redesigned the way that they make CPUs and their whole philosophy, and it really changed the game for them. And what really surprised me was that comparing a high-end Pentium 4 to the lowest Core 2 Duo that I could find, and seeing how the performance was, wow, it really kept up. This was entry-level Core 2 Duo. Amazing. And it did it all by staying much cooler and using less power. There you go. Tell me, did you have a Core 2 Duo? Which model did you have? Love to hear about it in the comments. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Had a lot of fun making it. It was great comparing these two legendary CPUs. If you'd like to support my channel, links are in the description. Thank you to everybody that does. You guys are absolute legends. Hope you enjoyed this video. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye-bye.